Good morning to Bromfels in the 35 corridor. I'm Daly Edwards here, the host of the Real Deal Real Estate Show. And today's special guest is Jonathan Packer. He's president and CEO of the Greater New Braunfels Chamber of Commerce. We're going to be talking about what's gone on in the last year, what may be going on in the near future, and some other interesting items. But first, it's time for the New Braunfels Title Market Report. Today, we're looking at the hometown of New Braunfels, and sales in the last 90 days in New Braunfels were even with last year at 253 homes sold, but in the last 30 days, we've sold 75. Now, that number's up about 10% from last year. Availability declined for the first time in a while, slightly down 8%. There are 549 homes in the market in New Braunfels. There are 2 under 200,000, 68 from 200 to 300,000. That was a 20% drop in a month. 69 from 300 to 400, 116 from 400 to 500, and 195 that are over 500,000. Now, that number's still staying pretty elevated. So we've still a little flush on inventory. In fact, when you look at the numbers, we're truly a buyer's market. Now, I'd keep an eye on inventory and a number of things because I'm telling you the price point right now is a true buyer's market over 275,000. Under 275, we got buyers lined up. We just don't have anything for them. The rental market gained inventory, which is already saturated. We have 145 homes on the market for rent in New Braunfels as of this week, with 50% of those being over $2,000 a month. 53 were available under $1,800, but when we go $1,200 and under, there are 7. So if you just do the math, 3 times rent, $36,000 a year. If you make less than $18 an hour, you are not getting into an apartment or a house. Now, Harvard report stated this week that over half of the renters in the United States are spending more than they can afford on housing. Until wages go up or costs pull back, the disparity will continue. That means reduced savings. That means they're on a situation where if they run into a catastrophic illness, they're going to be upside down. Now, just as a side note, there are many politicians and factions that want to see people broke renters, less educated, and need of government to be on the dole. You put them in a pen, you lead them to slaughter, and then you can control them for the rest of their life. We need to change that to where people can be strong and independent. Now, the mortgage market improved this week with 30-year conventional pulled back to 6.63, with 15-year hit 5.95, and finally, FHA and VA 30-year dropped to 6%. Don't thank the Fed. Thank the bond market. The 10-year Treasury adjusted for us, and that's what got us where we wanted. Now, the bond market was our friend, I said. 10-year declined to 4.043, which reset interest rates. The 2-year Treasury was up to 4.389, and the 91-day T-bill was at 5.21. It is still one of the most sound investments out there if you want a conservative 5% return. Oil prices took a big reversal this week, taking a drop from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we were at 78 a barrel. Today, we're at 72.39. Now, we need to be careful with our oil reserves and more. China is continuing to take over southern Iraq oil fields as we have vacated that. And then they're making more deals with the Iraqi government. Tensions continue to rise in the Middle East, and a number of these subjects could lead to solidarity in the Middle East, pushing us out and putting us in position for that embargo that Jimmy Carter got. So if we don't get our reserves back up to where we can take a hit like that, we have exposed ourselves economically and other military ways too. BMW today announced that they believe they have a very workable hydrogen engine and plan to go into full production in 2025. Now, if they, along with several other manufacturers, are able to deliver that, it could be trouble for EVs. Why? Because hydrogen, unlike EV, can go the distance, refuel quickly, and in Texas, that's really important. Now, it also means that convenience stores can be able to refuel you at a hydrogen station, so the convenience stores continue to be successful, whereas EVs right now, well, if you've got a Mustang, you've got to go to San Marcos to get a quick charge. All 3 hours. Yeah, like we're patient enough for that stuff. Now, stock market had a pullback early and then again late, but it really hit the run. Yep, the U.S. stock market, the Dow rose to 38,575, the NASDAQ 15,603, and the S&P tried to break 5,000 so badly, except it got hung at 49.53. But if everybody keeps fuzzy and happy, we're liable to see good numbers again next week. Big offices are struggling, but family offices aren't. What do we mean by that? Well, office spaces where they've got, 10,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet. We've had everybody working from home, and those have been, some cash pigs. But the small ones where you can rent 100 square feet, 200 square feet, there's been a great demand for those. And so family operations and small investors are doing pretty well with that. Now, real estate sales were up this week. Interest rates improve. In spite of the Fed, availability reduces. Buyer's market is still in play. Oil prices decline. Stock market up. Bond market up. Good. The Dow rose to 38. Good. The weather's been nice. The parks are pretty. And my goodness, we've got so many good things going on, including, don't forget this, the Fed, they keep not doing what they're saying they're going to do. So Powell came out this week and said, hey, I'm not going to reduce the rates in March. I told you he wasn't going to do it. It's all going to be up to the bond market if we're going to get it down. Now, something else happened that they weren't ready for. 353,000 new jobs in December and January. 107 first-time claims. That's down almost 40,000 in first-time unemployment claims. The only way we're going to have an economic train wreck and some of the doom and gloom prognosticators is if the Fed and the Congress screw it up. But business is trying to get the engine running hard. So that's my day for today, folks, in the Real Deal Real Estate Show. And let's get out this weekend and go play. And we're back on the Real Deal Real Estate Show, and our special guest is Jonathan Packer. He's the president and CEO of the Greater New Braunfels Chamber of Commerce. And we're ready to talk about all types of good things. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great. Yourself?
Doing really good. Excited about this year.
Well, great. Hey, and as a reminder, this portion of the show is brought to you by Meyer Heating and Air Conditioning, keeping you comfortable all year long. Well, let's jump into it. The economy has been kind of wacky over the last couple of years. Forces have been positive and negative depending on what's going on. Tell us, what some of the successes were in the feeling both for the city and the chamber in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, the last year has been a little bit of an adjustment. So we had this, first of all, we were coming on the heels of multiple years of change, of peculiar markets doing peculiar things. If you look at the high-tech industrial sector, just really fast pace of deals where they were making decisions rapid fire, quickly. Available sites and available buildings led the way. So I think last year was a bit of a reset on that front. When you look at job creation, things were expensive. There were some resets need to happen there, but then interest rates kicked in, and I think decision-making timelines just got longer. On the tourism side, Certainly the drought, the heat played a factor. But all in all, we're in a really fortunate place. This is in my opinion, about the best place to be in the best state in the best country. So our issues are more that we did slightly less good than we did the year before.
Well, that's one thing is that when we talk about slightly less good, the rest of the nation is wheezing,
Yeah.
So we've been able to diversify our economy overall. We're not relying on one thing, and the Braunfels exemplifies that. And so I think that's what's given us a lot more resilience. Now, what are some key things that happened this year that you're really good at? What new industries we bring in, or were there new openings that maybe y'all had put into play several years ago, but now they're actually vertical and in play?
Yeah, so I think 2023 we saw, we really dug into working with our existing company base. That's where you're going to get the most yield in terms of economic value to the community, not by recruiting outside, but by working with what you already have that's here. And so companies like DTEX are seeing expansions in the future. Continental just struck a deal with Aurora for autonomous mobility technology. So, and there's many others that are doing well in this economy. And what I think is really interesting to look for in the future is where do those strongholds start to take place? And I think Continental is a great example of just an operation and a facility that has tremendous opportunity, both on their site, but in adjacencies and connections. So it was a good year for existing company growth.
Well, and it's already here. So if you can get them to take on 25% more employees or 10%, you've got immediate impact in many cases versus the expense and novelty of trying to get somebody here, creating tax credits, working with the state to try to get it to do. So it makes sense that you go through a cycle like that where you kind of help homegrown. Do you see the same thing in small business approaching and going through the chamber and the growth there, that there have been a lot more new small business come in to the market?
Yeah. Entrepreneurship's alive and well in New Braunfels, and you see that across all different forms. So I think one thing maybe people don't realize is that the majority of entrepreneurs are what I call micro enterprises. These are people maybe doing something on their own out of their house. And then you have the traditional like Main Street small businesses. And you also have those high growth, innovation based companies. And I think in New Braunfels, we see all three types.
Are you currently trying to seek more office influence maybe, or trying to acquire maybe AI companies that lead to educational lifts at the same time? Anything like that?
Yeah, I think, well, just maybe zooming out a little bit apart from office and talking about industrial first, I think that the key with industrial and the key with office for us is high skill, high wage. So we're not focused on either office or industrial at a low skill, low wage variant. And the reason we focus on high skill, high wage is because we have a highly educated population. Right. And we try to match jobs with skills. So on the industrial front, the key to me is turnkey. So are utilities there? Are we investing in our transportation networks and infrastructure? On the office front, of course, at a macro level, you're seeing just significant shock to the market on office. You've got asset managers that don't know what the long-term play is going to be. And I think, funny enough, in New Braunfels, I think we have an opportunity for Class A office, and that's because when you look at a 60-minute drive time, and when you look at trends like corporations maybe having smaller headquarters campuses, but regional headquarters, I think that's where we really, when you combine that geographic advantage with our educated population, I think that's where you start to see some opportunities for office.
And we just brought in a company out of Austin that had a full operation going there, and the bulk of their business was near us or North San Antonio. And so they determined that they needed to put a satellite office at New Braunfels because the drive times through the traffic coming out of Austin was costing their payroll 2 hours of traffic time, where here, if they located, the bulk of their stuff with it would be within 30 minutes. So they saved a full hour of transportation time or getting hung in traffic to get their response for their equipment and supplies better.
Well, and sophisticated HR executives are going to look at the zip codes of their workforce.
Right.
And I don't think anybody knows where we're going to land on work from home or in the office or anything like that. But I think one thing we do know is that while we used to look at 45-minute drive time is the key metric, I think now we're looking at 60-minute. And so on a 60-minute basis, New Braunfels, in my opinion, is the best site in San Antonio plus Austin.
Well, and that fits in with kind of why Continental selected New Braunfels for two things. First of all, we had a higher level workforce than Seguin, where Continental and their mother company with Vitesco already had land. And so when they had the divorce or the split off, Continental chose to come here because they had a better traffic position, they had a better workforce, better educated, and it really met a lot of criteria. Now, in that regard, talking about education, I think John Kemple just announced, along with the city, that we've got a new technology school coming in. A little bit about that real quick.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that the Chamber worked extremely hard on with our friends in other cities and across our city. The bottom line is that in this area, there is a shortage of supply for high-skilled technical training and a high demand for it. And we did not have the ability to have a high-quality training provider meet that demand. Through a bill authored by John Kemple, he's chairman of House Higher Ed, Senator Campbell took the bill up in the Senate, and we were able to pass House Bill 4997, which allows Texas State Technical College to build a campus in Comal or Guadalupe counties. They're a really fascinating institution. They don't get compensated via credit hours or hours in a classroom. They get compensated by the employment outcome when someone gets a job.
Right.
So they have every incentive to only work on high demand, high wage jobs. And so we have to find land and we have to find funding to build a campus. But
we are back on the Real Deal Real Estate Show, where our special guest is Jonathan Packer. He is the president and CEO of the Greater Chamber of Commerce for New Braunfels. Okay, and we can reverse that, so it's all good. At any rate, Jonathan, you gave a presentation the other day I thought was very interesting. The city of New Braunfels and the Chamber of Commerce went to Greenville, South Carolina, and looked at a city that has changed itself, moved its identity from being just a highly industrialized city that really dates back to the Civil War, and all the different side effects that came from that, and has now turned themselves into a really mixed-use cultural environment that gives northern South Carolina something to offset the influence and style of Charleston and some of the areas. So
the
talk
upstate
about
region,
that.
yeah. So this is a program the Chamber put together. This is a program. This in 2023 is the first time we did this, but we do things like this all the time. I think it's important that as a city and as a business community, you look for communities that have dealt with similar challenges you're dealing with today, that maybe dealt with similar opportunities and found creative solutions. And so that's the spirit with which we went to Greenville. We didn't go there because we think it's an apples to apples comparison of the city, but we do think that they 20 to 30 years ago very intentionally, creatively, and diligently focused on things that created a really nice result for the city and its residents. And so we took the opportunity. We took somewhere around 45 business and government leaders to Greenville. Everyone paid their own way. It was
including the mayor, and so that was good.
Yeah, so we took a group there just to see what we could learn.
Well, and I think in the presentation, what I saw is because they had a big vision, and then they bought into the big vision. They made some pretty dynamic changes. I think one of them was how they got rid of a quasi-interstate or a high-traffic road that was coming right through the middle of downtown, and totally changed how their downtown looked by actually narrowing the traffic, adding to parking, and then they were creative about their parking garages and their retail. You want to talk about that a second?
Yeah, what's really interesting to me about what Greenville did is they took weaknesses and created strengths. They use a phrase called "find your waterfall," and the road you mentioned was a highway driving straight over a beautiful waterfall. Now, that was a polluted river due to the industrial background of the city. And you look at New Braunfels, where we have a beautiful river, and
we have pollution, but aviary.
It's it's not at the scale that they had dealt with. And so, what's interesting to me is they found strength and weakness. We already have those strengths. And if we can learn from everything, you mentioned parking, there's several other things that I think we can learn from where we already have those strengths.
Sure.
And apply them really to the benefit of the community and economy.
Well, and what it really showed is that how does business and the government work together to see a common vision. I think, one of the concerns a lot of people have with growth, and we always hear the anti-growth side, no. They really took a different approach to it to say, how can we make it work for us? So they had developments with great green spaces, open spaces, improved their parks, utilized the river. What did you see in that? Did you see that there's opportunities for us?
Yeah, I guess there's 2 points I'd make. One is that cities are for people, right? You don't, you mentioned the example of slowing a street down, but and we're very fortunate to have beautiful public spaces where people spend time together, and
right.
that's part of the magic of New Braunfels. But they made really intentional decisions around just the way in which humans move throughout a city. They created a beautiful tree canopy. The
downtown was gorgeous.
Added public spaces, parking, mixed-use developments, and all of those things. And in a way that where they added to the city, they didn't recreate the city. They just enhanced the charm. I think the second point I'd make, and I'm a big believer in the free market, and that often entrepreneurs and business owners are finding a way to create value. And you can also have an entrepreneurial public sector that looks to partner creatively. One thing we're very fortunate for here in New Braunfels is that we have some phenomenal catalytic projects where there's private sector capital ready to be deployed in a way that only enhances the existing charm and character of the city. And I'm speaking of opportunities with the River Mill project, with the ADM Mill project, with future South Castell development. Just and I guess what we learned from Greenville was just first of all, the importance of aligned advocacy and working together,
right.
But also embracing bold visions and having the conviction to stay the course.
And it's very important. We saw it, and I'm fortunate when you gave the presentation about Greenville, South Carolina. I was fortunate enough to be there 40 years ago, 35 years ago. And at the beginning of the changes of how they were thinking throughout South Carolina, it wasn't just Greenville. Greenwood, South Carolina was making changes. Columbia which had never really dealt with the Congaree River the way they should. The island and Myrtle Beach, all of them, Edisto Island, all of those things began to change. And then the same thing was going on in Georgia with Savannah and how they were doing things, but things like Macon and Columbus and Helen, Georgia, which is probably one of the biggest comparisons to kind of like New Braunfels, very German heritage. They had a nice little downtown, a small company, very similar to New Braunfels 25 years ago as far as population base. But they decided to give themselves an identity that that's what they were. They educated their people to speak German, all their shops. They put in a wonderful Oktoberfest, and that changed the tourism, and then it changed the retail and changed the environment. So sometimes just seeing how somebody else made something pretty neat's really good for everybody.
Yeah, and once again, the lesson may not be to do exactly what somebody else does. I think we all believe in just the specialness and the uniqueness of the city. The lesson is to stay the course and to be ambitious, and to adopt a unapologetically positive view of what your city can accomplish.
I want to touch on that, and just for a second. And that is a very profound and prolific statement. And one of the things that a couple of people told me that they got out of the trip was we've gotten in the habit, in some cases, some leadership, some of the people talk negative about growth, where we're the envy of so many places in the United States that would love to be the second fastest growing city and so on. And when you start to talk negatively, you start to put impediments to things, and the community begins to dig itself as this is awful. And so the talk changes. When you can flip it to positive, you start to take a look at how to move this vision forward to create something better while dealing with the absorption of the growth.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, negativity is a much simpler emotion than positivity.
Right.
And I think one of the things that's really special about New Braunfels is the involvement that the average person takes in the community, and involvement is the antidote to negativity.
Great.
There's a quote in a book I like that says, you should speak like you're right, listen like you're wrong, and be willing to change your mind. And I think this idea that we can stay the course with conviction, with a positive view of our city, doesn't mean that there's not a lot of discovery that goes on, that we don't need to be flexible and willing to listen. I think you can do both at the same time.
Well, and I think different ideas that come in. A lot of time you go, well, we've never done that here. Well, does that mean we should? And you have to evaluate that. So everything's an evaluation of what enhances. I mean, one of the things I see is that I think it was very good what MBU did with their old facility down off of Lakeview. And if you look at that as an extension into Landa and the connectivity there, if you can make that even more fluid and then go across, and the city look at someday buying the old horse farm and extending it where you can, naturally, you don't have to get the big centerpiece because you just keep adding pieces to it to extend it. That vision and future changes, and then how you develop or how you look, how you intertwine that. I mean, some of the things we can talk negative about Austin all day long because people do, but some of their office campuses are really cool and lots of green space, and the trees are really heavy and that kind of thing. So I think when we start to ask better questions, we probably come out with better results.
I think you're right.
And so, what one thing would you like to leave the public with on the future for 2024 and 25?
We meet with local employers, and we meet with workforce experts and others. And so we're focused on two really important workforce issues this year. And I just want people to know that, because I think investing in the workforce is good for business, and it's good for families, and it's good for individuals, and it's good for everybody. It's a benefit that pays off in the short term and the long term. And so two projects we're working on. One is the TSDC campus that we recently mentioned. It's going to take us years to get that developed, but we're working on that very intentionally. The second is we're going to be working on a early childhood education strategy for the city, otherwise known as daycare. And where we want to start at the chamber is by making the business case. This is a business issue. This prevents people from going to work. This prevents employees from performing as well as they can. We need high quality, and affordable daycare options in this community. And we're going to start by making the business case on that. So we're very early in that process, but it's something that's just really important that we work on.
Well, great. Well, thank you. How can people get a hold of you, Jonathan?
We're at the Chamber. We're down on Seguin Avenue. We're at innewbraunfels.com.
Well, that's all the time we have today for that particular subject. Now, folks, it's with a bittersweet we talk to you. Now, we've been on the air now for 6 years, and yours truly is running for city council. And so the issue is I want to commit the same amount of time that I've been putting into the radio show, but more for you as your city council representative for District 3. So this is the last show for the Real Deal Real Estate Show. It's been fun, entertaining, and we hope you've enjoyed the information. Doesn't mean we won't come back once we know how big of an appetite the city council takes from you.